Good evening. Welcome to For the Hour. I am Glendora Lashley. This evening we're going to be talking about a topic that I am very passionate about. It's a serious topic, especially for us here in Tobago. And of course, if you're in the Caribbean region, Trinidad, Barbados, Grenada, wherever you're looking on from, we definitely need to be able to focus on this topic. All right, so this evening we're going to be talking mental health. And is mental health the new public health crisis? You tell me, what do you think? In studio with me, I have a panel of powerhouse guests. All right, we have three specialists in their own right. We have clinical psychologist, Dr. Alina Williams. We have Delisa Rollocks at therapist. And we have Hanif Benjamin, clinical therapist and traumatologist. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening. Good evening.
I'm almost scared of you all. You know, I've seen all of you all in action, and you all are some heavyweight people in the nation. How are you feeling this evening?
Not too
bad.
Tired but good.
Tired but good. Yeah. All right. So as I said, we're talking mental health, and of course we're just off the COVID. Well, we're not really off the COVID-19 pandemic, but we in Trinidad and Tobago, we've today experienced for the first time in 2 years. Is it just about 2 years? Over 2 years, the lifting of the mandatory mask restrictions. And for some people, they may have found that wearing a mask was traumatizing. Right? For some people, the COVID pandemic was just a problem. And fear not, we have three specialists here who will help us talk through some of these issues surrounding mental health. And I want you to understand that when we say mental health, it's not a negative thing. All right, because mental health can include mental wellness, and we will hear more about that. But before we get into heavy discussion, I'd like for each of you all to just share with our viewing and listening audience in terms of your roles, your professional roles that you're representing here tonight. What are these roles, and you know, what's the importance in our space especially? And I'll start with Dr. Williams.
All right, thank you very much, Glendora. Good night, Tobago, and good night to our listening public. I am Dr. Williams. I am a clinical psychologist, and clinical psychologists are responsible for the diagnosis and treatment of mental disorders. We often work as part of a clinical team. We call it a multidisciplinary team. So that includes perhaps psychiatrists, mental health officers, psychiatric nurses. However, in isolation, we do counseling, whether that's individual counseling, group counseling. We also do psychological testing, which is an important branch in mental health because it allows us to conceptualize cases, to understand persons in depth, and to have a feel for what might be going on in a person's life. And clinical psychologists are found in both the public system and, of course, in the private sector.
All right, lovely. And let's move to Delisa Rollocks.
Good evening, everyone. I am Delisa Rollocks, a UK registered art psychotherapist. I'm also a UK trained art psychotherapist and art psychotherapist. So what I do, I offer therapy services to persons who have difficulty communicating verbally and dealing with everyday issues. I offer individual and group sessions to individuals who are looking for personal growth and dealing with everyday issues, including of mental health issues as well.
All right, and let's go to Hanif Benjamin.
Thank you, Hanif E. Benjamin. It is President and CEO at the Center for Human Development Limited, clinical therapist, clinical traumatologist, field traumatologist, youth specialist, and the list goes on. But more importantly, what we do is really deal with cases of trauma, and of course trauma can be any event that in Trinidad term changes a person's life, causes a person through the event to experience difficulty in their everyday functioning. And so we provide that level of deep intervention where we help them through that traumatic experiences to really get a level of functioning somewhat like what they had before, and if not, help them create a new level depending on where and what they want to do.
Right. Okay. So right off the bat, in the local space, in the Caribbean, in Tobago, of course, whenever there's a discussion about seeking help, seeking professional help, trained people like yourself, we tend to, and I'm saying we as the average citizens, we tend to say, but I'm not mad, I ain't crazy, nothing happened to me, you know, that's for a certain kind of person. Each of you all explain 3 different areas, and so I want to jump right in terms of some of the presenting symptoms, right? And I want to say this carefully, because sometimes when we have this discussion, people may think about other people that they know and so on. This is not to diagnose anybody, right? This is just to, as an individual, perhaps think about what you may be experiencing and wonder if help is around the table in terms of what the experts are talking about. So if I am stressed out, everyday stress, Dr. Williams, getting up by going to work, you know, may or may not have children, dealing with bills, just dealing with everything right now, does it make sense to come to see you?
Okay. So, Glendora, what you're really asking about is what is mental health then, right? And what I want to stress is that mental health is not the absence of mental illness. When we talk about mental health, we are looking at 3 things: how things affect your thoughts, your behavior, and your emotions. And when these 3 areas, or any of these 3 areas, are compromised, we think that that person is experiencing mental health distress. So mental health exists along a continuum. There is at one spectrum mentally ill. At that spectrum, most likely that it might warrant hospitalization, or at least treatment seeking, inpatient-wise. And then on the other extreme, there is mental health. But most people actually fall somewhere along that continuum. Right. So you don't have to wait until it gets to the extreme to seek help. Once you notice there is a change in the way that you think or process information, in the way that you feel, so we're talking about your mood, we're talking about your reactions, your emotional reactions, we're referring to how you feel in a day-to-day experiences, as well as so how you feel, your thoughts, your feelings, your behavior. Once your behavior is inconsistent, you're not functioning as you used to, there is distress you're experiencing, then of course it's okay to seek mental health services. And we try to get away from pathologizing mental illness. So it doesn't have to be that you are on the extreme. It just has to be that there is some noticeable change in behavior. Either you notice it or somebody else notices it.
But the thing about it is that, and of course this is my own personal opinion, I tend to believe because of, and I'm hoping later on I can get from Hanif, you know, some of the different types of traumas and so on, because of the prevalence of trauma in our lives, from the time you were born, you know, into this space. You don't have the stress yet, but you've inherited DNA, and a lot of what comes through is trauma, right? Our socioeconomic conditions, of course, aren't necessarily the best. So for me, I tend to think maybe we should adopt seeking therapy, seeking counseling before things happen, you know, just to be able to understand that, okay, we come with baggage and we're going to need to explore that. Do you think that I'm being extremist with that kind of thought?
I would not say so. I think that self-awareness is key to functioning and to being able to reach your potential. Ms. Rollocks spoke about helping her clients achieve personal growth. We can't go anywhere until we actually know who we are and we know ourselves, we know our full capacity. So it doesn't have to be that you are experiencing distress or that you are dysfunctional or that you even have a mental illness to begin that process. It simply means that you are curious. You might be curious about yourself, curious about why you respond to certain things the way you do, why you feel the way you do about certain things. And you mentioned DNA. Mental health is comprised of the biopsychosocial model. So it's biology, our DNA, our chemistry, our neurotransmitters, hormones, but it's also our psychology and it's our social environment, and all those things combine to create mental health.
Okay, so I want to go to Delisa. I am a fan of Delisa's work. It's new to our space, art therapy. Those of y'all listening, you might want to pull Google and so on while you're listening to what she has to say. You talked specifically about helping those with challenges communicating. So I want us to go a bit into that in terms of what you've done so far. What do you mean by having a challenge communicating in this instance?
Okay, so let me explain to you what art therapy really is. So it is a form of psychotherapy. It is used to help persons who have challenges communicating verbally. So as a non-formal verb of as a non-formal mode of communication, the art therapy, the materials can be used as a way of communication. So when words become difficult to verbalize, the issues are more or less presented in the artwork presented. It should not be considered as an art class, as there is no right or wrong way to use the materials.
Right.
The materials is used as a form of communication. So my first degree was in visual arts. So as a visual artist, I have a better understanding of interpreting art, but it doesn't say that I am here to tell my clients exactly what the work means. So for example, you could come and you could create like a nice sunset seascape, but it doesn't mean that, okay, because you create this composition, it means that, okay, yes, you're probably feeling to go on the beach. They may have some form of sentimental value towards the image itself.
Right.
So when my clients come and they present this, using the psychodynamic approach, we get to the root cause of the issue.
Right.
So I would come and I would ask clients, I will, try to spoke them, it seems as though, it's an interesting composition, you want to tell me about it. So it gives them the opportunity to more or less talk about the work produced.
Right.
And in that, over a period of time, based on whatever issues that you bring to the forefront, when I conduct my mid-review and end review, you have a visual representation of your growth and the issues that you would have addressed and treated in the intervention.
Okay. Now, sometimes if we book an appointment with Dr. Williams, and we go in there and we really don't want to say nothing, we would just sit down and spend the whole hour quiet, or however long the appointment is for. Is that a possibility when people come to art therapy? Like if they don't want to draw anything, they don't want to say anything, they're just sitting there.
So each session is tailored to meet the needs of my clients. So I have clients that will come in and they don't want to communicate at all. They will go straight to working with the materials. That's totally fine. I notice most of my clients who have anxiety, they would go directly to the art materials. But for someone who is more or less looking for personal growth and development, you have certain behaviors that you want to work through. They would come and we would talk about it because there's talk therapy involved in it. And once I realized that clients have difficulty, or there's a moment in pause, or I feel as though they are trying to hide something, or they're not comfortable in speaking about it, I would then invite them to the table to engage with the materials. So it all depends on your ability to communicate as well, and exactly what it is you want to get out of the intervention.
All right. So basically, it's open to anybody, and you can go in and try it out. And I want to come to Hanif EA Benjamin. I see you put in the EA, so I have to respect the EA there. In terms of trauma, there's something that I read where it spoke about trauma basically from childhood is what really manifests into different things in adulthood. So I think I was looking at something in relation to labeling different illnesses that people may have, and they were saying to try to shy away from that because we're not exactly sure what causes what, even though many people need labels to be able to, I suppose, work with. What stood out to me is that what the medical people were saying is that a lot of these things that present stem from childhood trauma. So as a traumatologist, I'd like for you to explain to me and to all of us, what are some of those childhood traumas that we all have experienced and can go through?
Right. So good night again to all the listening and viewers. So it's an interesting conversation, one that I fell upon a few years ago when I began looking intimately at the adverse childhood experience. That study, 1 page, but so powerful, 10 questions, but very, very powerful. Dr. Nadine Burke from Kaiser, with that team, did a study with thousands of people looking at the adverse childhood experience. And what that showed is that when you score about 4 or more, there was a direct correlation between childhood trauma and illnesses in adult life, medical and mental health illnesses. That study, powerful indeed. And so even from when it started to now, there have been many branches of that studies that continues to show that trauma in children reverberates through a lifetime. And more importantly, trauma untreated. And interestingly for me, which is my PhD study, is children who were traumatized as child, did not receive treatment, and end up as a juvenile delinquent.
Wow.
And so, I cannot not have this conversation without touching the country, because just today or yesterday, the Prime Minister is talking about working with the young people and crime, because that is where the concentration is. And in my mind, I immediately go to childhood trauma, and whether or not these people who are perpetrators of crime were in fact traumatized as children, and whether what we're seeing now is a direct relation. And so you're quite right. And when you're talking about childhood trauma, we're talking about a trauma which may be experienced immediately or a lifelong trauma. So we're talking about type 1 or type 2 trauma. Type 1 traumas are those what we call acute trauma. It happened right now. Right? So a person is raped now, a child is abused now, as opposed to a child who might be living for a period in trauma. And the reason why I separated, because as a traumatologist, I treat it differently. And so sometimes I get upset with some of my colleagues because they see trauma as just trauma, but you have to drill down a bit. Because for a person who is experiencing acute trauma, to me, that is more of a crisis mode that requires a different level of intervention. Right. As opposed to a child who would have been living with sexual abuse for many years, under domestic violence for many years, living with bullying for many years. You now have to treat that child differently, you see. And so you are quite correct. When you are traumatized as a child and have not received any intervention, it will change your trajectory in life. And that is where sometimes I use a lot of art therapy or therapists to come in to do this work too, because sometimes to unlock that trauma from childhood. And when you look at adults, I tell you this. The other day I made a statement on television and in the papers. I said, we have so many adult children bruised walking around. Because many of us were traumatized as children, never received treatment, and we can't have a proper relationship. We have trust issues. We have anger issues. We have issues with the wind that blows too hard. We have issues with everything. And that is because we have never processed the trauma. And in the Caribbean space, you hear a lot about, well, I deal with that already, or I put that behind me, and I'm trying to figure out where exactly behind me, because there is nothing called put it behind me. Yeah. It always manifests itself at the worst time. You know, we have said at the right time, at the worst time. And so when you talk about childhood trauma, you're talking about something that is near and dear to me, because I believe that children are quite malleable. Their brain is very beautiful in terms of changing, and they can receive help and they can go back on track to some degree.
Right.
But when they don't receive that help, their manifestation become one that we call difficult.
So, with respect to parents and the adults who are responsible for children and in the space and observing children, one of the challenges I think many of us have is that inability to really understand what trauma is. There's some things that off the top, sexual abuse, physical abuse, those things are easy, you know, to be able to say, well, okay, that could probably cause trauma. Even if you don't know what trauma means, you're going to tell yourself something bad coming from that. But our existence in Tobago, in Trinidad, in the region, many of us grew up with neglect. Not because we had parents or guardians who didn't love us, but they had to go out and work. Something I laugh about all the time right now is the law with respect to children. Neglect is leaving anybody under 18 at home. Hello.
We all in jail.
Hello. One thing I told Children's Authority, listen, the whole of Tobago gonna be jail, you know, because you're talking about how people live in and how we had to survive. Something in Tobago in particular right now that bothers me is that many children are at home. They have to be at home, unfortunately. Mothers are out to work, fathers are out to work, granny out to work, everybody going somewhere. We're not talking about people who just want to lime or whatever. You're talking about people who need to be able to find food to put on the table. School children are now home for much longer hours by themselves. You're forced to do all kinds of things. Is that trauma manifesting in some kind of a way there?
So you said a couple of things very interesting. So I want to start with where you started in terms of people thinking that trauma is a catastrophic event. And I want to give you one example, and this will tell you what trauma really is from a layman's term. This young lady, Alina, no offense to you, was seeing a psychologist for some time, an 8-year-old. And they couldn't find out what was going on. So they called me. And when I met with the child, 8 years old, the goldfish died. That was the trauma. Every morning she would come and she would feed that goldfish. She would come home from school excited to go meet her goldfish. The goldfish died. Mom flushed the goldfish down the toilet and bought a goldfish by the end of the day, but the child never recovered. And for months, everybody's trying to figure out, well, they did doctor tests, if the child was abused, is the school abusing the child? I mean, so many things they started to do. And that's the power of trauma. It is any incident that changes your perspective on life, that deals with your emotion. And so when we want parents to understand trauma, I tell them off the bat, a trauma is a personal thing to you.
I was about to say that. Trauma is very individual. I describe it to my patient as something that shatters you. It changes your worldview.
Correct.
So it's like you see things a certain way, and then you put on shades and everything looks different, even though the world is the same.
Trauma lens.
You see differently now because you have on that shades. That is trauma. So trauma could be a bad breakup. Trauma could be going through losing your job. It could be poverty. It could be debt, as he mentioned. It could be debt. But one thing that is also important to discuss is that trauma doesn't have to be personally experienced by you.
Correct.
It can be vicarious. You could hear of somebody's trauma or witness something or see something, and you experience the same trauma as if it happened to you. And that is what I am finding a lot of us are experiencing here. So one thing that stood out in particular was the death of the 4 divers a couple months back. That was extremely traumatizing for the nation. Extreme. So we weren't personally there. We are not first relatives or even relatives at all, but it traumatized the nation, and constantly there is death on the news. There's shootings, there's murders all the time. There's a lot happening. So even though it's not happening directly to us, there's trauma, and then there's collective trauma, which is what we as a nation are experiencing.
And you see, just if I could jump in, that is why a long time ago, I said that we are a traumatized nation.
We definitely are. I agree.
And we continue, and that is why the question that you asked at the beginning, whether mental health is the new public health, it's smart. We cannot not see it. We cannot not experience it, whether it is vicariously or not, because every single day, we are experiencing, like, I don't read the papers, but it's sometimes you always in the papers. I say, but I don't read it. I don't look at the news because I cannot, because it's just, you can imagine last thing in the night is where you watch it. Literally, you watching a horror show, you know.
Just before this interview, too, I messaged. I was like, "Is there any recent events we're going to be talking about?" Because I'm very intentional now about
me too.
not accessing. It's too much.
I deal with trauma every day in my job. I don't want to go and look at the news.
You know. Let me ask you this, all of you. It's funny you said that because I am in media now, and I've been in media for a few years. You know, I'm not like a veteran media person, but I've been in media for a few years. And when I was invited to the media, I remember one of the struggles was being asked or being told to read the papers. I had given up papers, television, and that kind of thing like 10 years before. I didn't own a TV deliberately. That was my intention, because all the yeah. You know, at the time moving to Facebook, it was when high five became just glitz and glamour.
Yeah.
If only remember what high five is.
I don't want to talk that talk.
Right, so let's probably still have some pictures up. But, you know, people were just coming and invading your space. And I remember at the time when I joined Facebook, when it had just started up, people weren't migrating there yet. You know, we are the bandwagonists. So our country was kind of slow. People had accounts, but they weren't using it. And the concept of talking to a wall, now in my own traumatized mind, I love the idea, because I found a space where I could just write things with nobody to just comment below and say anything, you know, and that was a way of kind of just dealing with expressing stuff. And I'm saying that to say, in terms of bringing it now, many of us may be dealing with certain types of trauma, but we're not expressing it. And we're also not expressing it because we're in a space that tells you what you're experiencing. Normal, why are you worried about that? Why are you taking on that? You know what I mean? So for the individuals listening, I mean, we have the collective trauma in terms of those major ones, like the death of the divers and that kind of thing. What are some other maybe ways or little things that people can start recognizing, okay, maybe this is affecting me and I should talk to somebody? And I'm going to ask each of you for one example, if you can think about it, and then we'll cut a break. So I'll start with Dr. Williams. Just one example, if you can think of anything people are experiencing, maybe something that a client shared with you.
So I would say
generally,
one of the first things or two things to look at is changes in sleep and appetite. If you notice that you're not sleeping like you used to, or you can't fall asleep, or you're up at night tossing and turning, or you have no appetite, or you're eating too much, maybe you need to take a step back and look at what is happening around you. There's something in your environment or internally that is triggering that response.
I think persons need to more or less look at their emotions, the fluctuations of your emotions. Are you easily triggered by something in terms of your anger? A certain conversation, you know, you may react inappropriately or, you know, too intense. That could also be a trigger for you.
Okay.
And in addition to that behavior, I think emotion and behavior is two of the most easiest thing to recognize, because we are emotional people and we respond through our emotion with behavior. So once you see a behavior that has changed, whether it was bad behavior to good behavior, you want to pay attention. I call it the baseline. Look at that baseline of emotion and behavior, and once that has gone above or below that baseline, time for you to check yourself and figure out if something else, according to Alina, is going on in your social environment or internally.
Okay, so we have looking at eating and sleeping patterns, we have looking at emotional responses and also emotional behavior. And I may need to book a session, because I'm one of them people who just go from 0 to 100 real fast. So I might have to book 3 sessions with the specialist here. You're viewing for the hour. Stay with us. We're talking about mental health and whether or not mental health is the new public health crisis. Stay with us.
Everybody only worrying. Never ever worry. Don't mind how things looking hard. I tell them never ever worry. If your life can't get damaged bad, I tell them never ever worry. What I'm saying is true. So just consider Tatil is always right here for you. I tell them never ever worry. Don't mind if life make you sad. I tell them never ever worry. If your house get flooded out real bad, I tell them never ever worry. What I'm saying is true. So just consider Tatil is always right here for you. I tell them never ever worry if sickness catch you off guard. I tell them never ever worry if times fall on you real hard. I tell them never ever worry, what I'm saying is true. So just consider Tatil will always be here for you. Never worry about a thing. Tatil, where people are people. You know what I mean.
MI4 Security Services Company is the most advanced security service in Tobago. Ask about our cash in transit service. It's safe, risk-free, reliable, and timely. We provide safe banking delivery for all business types and sizes with highly trained staff, 24/7 monitoring, coordinated emergency response, and a well-maintained fleet of armored vehicles. Contact us at 660-7723 or visit our website at www.mi4securitytt.com to sign up today.
Excel Spa by Haley, where our highly trained staff are ready to deliver the top-class services in facial massages, waxing, nail enhancement, and body treatment. We are ideally located at Coco Avenue, Susalands, Tobago. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TripAdvisor, or you can call us on 730-0149. Excel Spa by Haley. Relax, renew, and rejuvenate.
Our national borders, our first step to security, but a possible access point for guns, drugs, crime. If it does not look right, do the right thing. Call Crime Stoppers anonymously. 800-8477. Report possible border crime.
Thank you for staying with us. You're viewing 40 Hour on Tobago Updates. We're having a discussion around mental health and whether or not mental health is the new public health crisis. Of course, we're here in Tobago, and so we're focusing on Tobago specifically, but the conversation is applicable to those of you in Trinidad, those of you across the Caribbean region, anywhere you're looking on from, really, because mental health is a global situation. We all have to deal with it. In studio with me, 3 professional people, all in the field of mental health. We have Dr. Alina Williams, clinical psychologist. We've got also Delisa, Rollocks, art therapist, clinical art psychotherapist. All right, and we have Hanif E.A. Benjamin, clinical therapist and traumatologist. All right, and if you're just joining us, well, you have to go back on the Tobago Updates page and start from the beginning because you missed a lot. Let me just throw out a question to you guys from somebody on the live. This person is asking, Natalie Taylor that is, what is the most effective technique to enhance someone's mental health? All right, very broad question. I'm going to start with Hanif and then come around.
Oh boy. Wow. Such a broad question requires a broad answer. But I will curtail indeed. How does one, secure one's own mental health? I will start where Dr. Lina spoke earlier in terms of the continuum from mental good health to mental ill health. Just like physical ill health, we exercise, we eat right, we try to reduce stress or stressful events or try to manage it. And if we see ourselves becoming ill, whether it's a cold or a cough, we then go to the pharmacy and we seek our help from our doctor. And just like the physical health model with mental health, to me is the same. You take care of your mental well-being, you practice self-care. Now, I'm not talking about buying ice cream or painting the nails and doing a facial self-care. As a matter of fact, I don't see that as self-care at all. I'm talking about, really looking at an audit. I like to call an audit of your life. And you look at the different facets of your life, the major areas, and you figure out whether these areas are performing the way it should. Because too often we just look at the overall Hanif, the overall being. We don't look at what is going on with my financial health, my emotional health, my spiritual health, my whatever health it is. And I believe once you begin to do an audit there, you start to recognize what is good, not so good, and indifferent, and you start to treat with that. So you become very targeted in your approach to mental well-being.
Right.
And I think once you begin to do that, you will recognize when you feel the way you feel, why you feel the way you feel, and be very targeted in treating that. And also, the beauty about what I'm saying here is that you can also recognize when you are heading down a particular road, you see, as opposed to waiting till you just stumble upon mental illness or mental ill health or acute mental stress, whatever it is, and then deciding to let me now do something.
Let me push you a little bit, perhaps in a bit of a crazy direction. One, I'm taking offense to you saying that the spa is not self-care. Not that I could afford the spa, but these days that's what we have, right? Sometimes you need a massage from a professional and you relax. So you're telling me that that's not the best option.
Let me put it that way. Those are Hanif Benjamin, consider those things to be feel good. I want to feel good. Because you could take all the sweetest massage you want tomorrow, your stress going to be right there.
Right,
you could go and paint your toe and do your eye as much as you want. Tomorrow you'll be looking very well stressed out. so let that be part of. Let that be. When I talk about self-care, because when I teach self-care these days now, I'm no longer just about those external things. I want to make sure that I am well in and out. Because of course, if you're not well in, you can't be well out, and vice versa.
So this leads me to the other question I wanted to ask you, which is my main question. You talk about spiritual wellness, right? There's that school of thought that says, for many of us, until we actually start finding that spiritual grounding. We're not talking religion here. For those of you all, it's a different thing, but kind of understanding self. Your core values, what you believe in. If you're conscious enough to be able to say, well, okay, I'm also checking ancestry, understanding the role of my ancestors, that kind of thing. When you say spiritual wellness, what do you mean? Are you talking about going down that direction, or is it something else?
I speak about, and once you have determined, so I will say with my client, I want you to list all the major domains in your life. You might be going to school, you might be married with children, you might be working, and you might be religious or spiritual, whichever one. And if you list that for me, then I'm saying, I want you to do an audit of this. Do you feel that in your spiritual connectivity, which could be sitting on a beach, meditating, you see, when I speak about this, I don't speak about going to a church or building a mandir or a mosque. That is you, if you want to do that. But all I'm saying to a person is, are you okay there? Are you comfortable enough, or do you think that you need to do more work in that area? Right. Just like I will say, do you feel that you're comfortable in your financials audit, or whether or not you're comfortable in your education audit? Because you could be stressed out with schoolwork. And so the audit in self-care for me is really having you do a deep dive into you and whether or not your life is where you want it to be. And if it is not, what can you do? And the beauty about this is you are drilling down. It is not the overall. You ever hear, man, especially men, I'm feeling good today, nah? What happened? Me, I just am feeling it. And you always hear that, and you could never pinpoint what exactly you're not feeling. When you do an audit, you help them to break it down into compartments and to see exactly where and what you might be feeling it. Every morning you get a headache and you're sure why.
I will come back to you there, because somehow I want to be presumptuous and say sometimes with the men it's just that deep conversation they need, because they very well know sometimes what's going on, but you have to dig,
for trouble,
dig, and especially if you happen to be the female companion of one of those men. Oh my gosh, you need to be feminine 101. You need to understand every single thing there to figure that out. But I want to go to Delisa.
Let's go to
Delisa. Back to the original question from our panelists and the person. Let me just remind you, what is the most effective technique to enhance someone's mental health, in your opinion?
So I have a different perspective on it. For me, I think the demands of life causes some form of imbalance. I think for us, as we get older, we more or less stray away from our more or less gifted talents. I think for me, if it is that, we find that form of balance to more or less, go back to to have that more or less reset. For example, I used to paint, but because when I went to study, I started seeing art differently. I stopped painting. And some persons would say, well, okay, you know, we have our artist block, you know, we just can't create for whatever reason or the other. But I think when persons more or less, you know, put aside what they're good at, some persons may be good at journaling, some persons like outdoor activities, sports, extra co-curricular activities. When you tend to not incorporate that in, you know, your daily life, I think that's where you have those challenges, that imbalance.
That's a deep one. I follow a belief system at this point, or a knowledge system versus belief system, that says you're here to do what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, in our space, a lot of our passions don't not bringing in any money, right? As if you're a visual and creative person in Tobago / Trinidad and Tobago, I mean, our big soca artists had to bust it to make some money. If you painting somewhere in a corner in an environment that have no appreciation for your paintings, you're gonna be stressed out. But again, to be able to be wholesome and happy, you're talking about your innate passions and creativity, and maybe this is how we end up in a session with Dr. Williams. So let me come to Dr. Williams with this question, and I will repeat it again. What is the most effective technique to enhance someone's mental health?
Okay, so I think Mr. Benjamin and Ms. Rollocks actually did a fantastic job explaining, because I actually do a combination of both of what they say. I always say that the first step is to be self-aware. Like, we cannot make progress if we don't know who we are, and people need to take time to introspect. A lot of us spend so much time developing interpersonal relationships when we need to focus on our intrapersonal relationship. How do we feel about ourselves? The person asks what is the most effective technique, and there is no such thing as the most effective, because what works for one person may not work for somebody else. Right. For me, I love exercising, I love baking, I love cooking. That is my current progression to good mental health. But for somebody else, it's something different, and you can't know that until you really know yourself. You have to know what works for you, and I think people should spend time developing that intimacy with themselves. And every day, I say every day, from the time you open your eye, there's something to stress you out. Whether it's a thought, whether it's an event, whether it's an awareness of something, there is going to be stress. You have to include one thing every day. It's like how we take our vitamins, our one a day, our multivitamin. We take that every day for our physical health. I tell people once a day at least, this is the bare minimum. Do something for your mental health. Right. Even if that's 5 minutes praying, if it's 10 minutes journaling, if it's 20 minutes exercising, do something once a day. Because as Mr. Benjamin said, we wait until it's too late. We wait until we are in crisis mode, and then we tell people to practice mindfulness.
Not when I'm
inside joke. Is that inside joke?
Let me step back.
If you're not doing something like that all the time, when you are in crisis mode, when things are bad, it is not going to work. No. And so every day, whether you are in a good state, in a bad state, try to incorporate mental health building techniques into your daily life.
You know what I want to ask you guys about as we're here? And I saw somebody in the chat, in the comments, Debbie Halls Julian, she says, our response to the challenges of life determines our stress level, right? This to me is sort of like that mindfulness thing, because it's easy to say, but challenging to practice.
Yes.
And we're not necessarily a society, you know, it's not like we came from a tribe, or many of us did not necessarily have a family unit that focused on discipline, you know, in the way that you may be exposed to when you join like the cadets or one of those groups that are focused on discipline. So if you come and tell me as an adult or a teenager, your reaction, we are in a society where our reaction to everything, depending on what you say to somebody, is to spark off on you. Or if we don't spark off on you, we hold it in and then we explode.
Or implode.
Or implode. So I looked at this and I mean, it is good advice. But how do you practice this? You all are the experts, right? You guys are the experts. How do you practice this? And I also want you to incorporate, for those of us who are parents, how do we as well, I suppose, how do we encourage the children? So Dr. Williams, you said, as the adult, try to do something positive once a day if you can. I try that for me. What do I do with my offspring? How can I encourage, practicing from now and maybe what may be applicable for younger ages? I know I'm pushing the limits with the brains here.
You know what's a good technique? Develop the attitude of a scientist. So the same way you would question yourself, you could question your child in a very facilitating way. So what makes you happy? What did you do today that made you smile? What did you find caused you to feel stressed out today? When do you feel most frustrated? That helps the child to start questioning themselves, because that helps them to now develop their own awareness. Do you feel happy when you do X or when you do Y? Why? And that is how you get that. But the best thing is social modeling. So once your child sees you doing positive or engaging in positive behaviors or behaviors that allow you to be at your best, that child is going to be motivated to do the same.
I wanted to just jump in there, because when you were talking there, Alina, what comes to mind is whether or not the parent is emotionally available to even begin to understand their own challenges, and secondly, to facilitate such a conversation in a non-judgmental and non-punitive way with their child. And most times when you see parent-child relationship break down, is because the parent is not emotionally available because of their own crazy stressors in life, like the person wrote there. And so it becomes very mechanical. We just have to do what we need to do to survive. You're pushing our societal nuances and some of the heavy building blocks. Non-punitive, non-judgmental.
Correct.
We're in Trinidad and Tobago.
And that has been my mantra all along. We must change because we are stressed out.
Yes.
This country is literally unhinged right now. Listen, anything could set people off, and we see that in the murder, in the crime, the way it is, the way
even
the crimes
are, domestic abuse and stuff,
the amount of murder, suicide we see, it tells you that we are at a place where our emotions are so far gone. I remember I said to the then Attorney General when they were talking about the domestic violence bill, I said, you cannot legislate an irrational mind. I said, there is no line with an irrational mind. When your emotion is taken over by stress, you can't pay the bills, and the wife saying we need this, the children saying daddy this, and you think, everybody dead. Or just I dead. You understand? And that is where we are as a society. And more, that question is so loaded and so powerful that person asks, and I want to thank them for that, because that is who we are as a country now. And in the pandemic, I was forced, even I am living stress because my business under pressure. I am thinking, Lord, do I need to close here too? So I am under pressure. We are all under pressure, and yet I still have to offer the advice to people. And I had to take my own advice. And I'm saying, how do you deal with all of these things to wake up in the morning and, like Alina say, affirmations? I said, what affirmation I'm telling me to say this hour in the morning? But I said, that ain't making no sense to me because I want to break something right now.
That's right.
And so for me, I had to say, you know what, Hanif? You have to become aware of what is. I had to become aware of what I can and could not do.
But I want to ask you though, like in our society, and I also want to bring in Delisa here, we tend to believe, and we follow bandwagonist type hype, Trinidad and Tobago is a happy place.
Oh Lord.
Everything people let's make a joke about. I mean, I am all guilty,
Well,
right? We laugh at
Memes.
everything. Sometimes when you look at the popular memes and the things, people who are closer to me and sometimes people that I have to interact with socially, I tend to say to them, we joke at this because it's default programming. But when you keep joking at that, it really and truly becomes a joke to you and you don't respect certain things. So when you see how we laugh at certain women, how we laugh at certain children, how we laugh at what people look like, you're pretending you're laughing, but you're internalizing, this is it. They say that we are happy people. I just say some of the real gip people that you have come across is some of the psychos that we have in the society. It is a terrible, terrible thing to say, but we have so many instances that when one beat or kill or whatever, everybody shock. How are we ending up with so much shock in the society? What are we missing or what are we ignoring? And I want to start with the children again, come in, because I don't think you got the chance to answer the children's question for me.
I think a lot of persons show who they are, but I think as a society we don't listen. When you look at the same social media, a lot of times when an individual is talking in a comical way about a certain issue, like children, I don't want no children, and them children again, those are their projected issues. But then when you do it in a comical manner, it becomes a joke for everyone. So I always say, or I always try to tell my clients, try practice, listening more. When you listen more, you really understand what persons are really struggling internally with. And I think when you look at the relationship with parents and children, I think a lot of children mask. Parents not taking the time to really listen to their children because of the demands of life.
Right.
For example, I was invited for a career day at a secondary school, and I was invited to more or less talk about art therapy and as a profession, etc. And the moment I started talking about art therapy, but more so the issues, because remember, these children more or less had to rewire. You took them out of the the physical classroom, and then a lot of them had to rewire into that whole online learning. That was a traumatic experience for most of these children. And then you had to re-enter them back into this into the physical classroom. A lot of these children would have experienced a lot of challenges. When you look at all the fighting, the school fighting, it makes you to wonder about why these children are so angry. But then the school becomes a safe haven for some of these children. It's an escape. So when you take that safe place, that safe haven from these children, what's going to happen?
You're really hitting powerful there, because in Tobago, in such a small space, a concern that I've had for many years now is that we don't have safe spaces. So I remember again saying to when the Children's Authority were coming across and they had those consultations and so on, there was a legal officer with them at the time, and they come, bright with their ideas and so on, and I was like, why are you coming there with ain't gonna work in Tobago, especially something like removing children. When you remove a child from their home, where are you putting them? And then if it's a child that have to rehabilitate and go back in the home, what's going on with the rest of the family? So when Delisa talk about school being a safe space, a simple thing like having a meal we take for granted. I know the government under pressure. I've always hoped that they could reintroduce breakfast in schools, because the bottom line is, and somebody in the chat spoke about diet as a way to deal with good mental wellness. If you're not eating right, your brain fried.
Nothing right.
You can't study. You can't do nothing.
Just yesterday, actually, I had my first patient. We were corresponding, but she was so out of it, I knew something was wrong. I asked her, "Are you okay?" She said, This was last week, Friday. I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I haven't eaten breakfast." I said, well, when you leave with me, are you going to have breakfast? She said, "Well, no, because I don't have breakfast." I said, "Okay." I said, "So how are you going to get breakfast?" She said, "I don't know. I haven't eaten since Wednesday." Wow. So here I am trying to talk to somebody about their mood and their anxiety. This is not... So I stormed out. I said, "Listen, I am not going to be helping clients when their basic needs," Maslow spoke about it. If somebody is hungry, I am not going to start working on anything emotional this person needs to eat.
And you see with the systems that we have now, I don't know how in Tobago, like when we were teenagers, when they call you out to something, they give you some food. That became almost like a socio-economic joke, because then it was this one coming for the food, that one coming for the food, yada yada.
Shame and stigma.
If you ever work with me, as Delisa knows, every time I put on a session, breakfast, lunch, 2 snacks, especially when I want some of the fellas to come to, not because you're trying to bribe them with food. Men already are a little difficult to keep them concentrated on certain things. Imagine a young man who ain't eat. A young woman could sit down there and pretend, women have some special skills. We're talking about was intrinsically feminine and masculine. How are you getting a young boy who so desperately vulnerable in our society now to come and sit down or engage with you in something that can help him if he has not eaten? And we're running out of time, so I want to close on 2 things. The addressing of the male in the society, because unfortunately at this point, when it comes to things that end up in debt, we have a lot of male perpetrators. I also have a concern about the silence by the males. Many times we miss interventions because the men are not coming out in the same numbers as the women. So male, and also what can we do to facilitate positive growth and development for our children, right? We have just about 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So I'll give each of you a minute each. Damn. In terms of, I could talk some more later, take out your time there, but I want you to close for me, unfortunately, because the time flies. Somebody there say we need a part 2. Right? Because this conversation is serious. We now getting warm. We now getting warm. But we have an issue in Trinidad and Tobago. And while it looks a little different, what exists in Trinidad versus what exists in Tobago, ultimately it's the same things in the background. Right? So we want the, how can we all come together to assist our men folk in this society? Young boys into males. What can we do for the children? And if you all want to touch on the females as well, it's not that I'm ignoring the females, but I always say we have a whole lot of support for women. Women can still cry and nobody judge women. Men can't cry right now. Right? Women can walk into the hospital fairly easy. You think, well, you can disagree with me and tell me what you want in terms of your clothing. You understand? But my experience has been, what I've seen is that we have much more support for women and girls.
Correct.
Right? But I also want to separate girls into children, because we are a society that we do not recognize children as any sort of entity to be respected. Children supposed to just do what you say, shut up and sit down in a corner. And I mean, that's how we ended up with mad people as adults. When they say mad, in this case, it's not medical madness, but just the societal kind of displays that we have, that some of us are proud to display. So are you ready? We're going down the road. So I started with Hanif because Hanif have plenty things he wanted to tell me, including the parts that he disagreed with me on.
Let me start with the cry. It's not that men don't cry or don't want to cry. I think we have not created a safe space, including in the home. Women are very, and I'm not watching you all deliberately, right? Over the years, the power of the tongue, right, the sting, a lot of females felt as if that is what they had. And so they dehumanize men and whatever else men, especially in the home as well. So in your home, there is no room to really be emotional, because we associate emotional with sissy, gay, girl, all kind of thing. So immediately, once you go down that track, you are labeled in a particular way. And when you're a boy, you are put in a man box, and you are told this is what and you should be, and this is what you must become. And if you step out of that man box, then something wrong with you. And so boys grow up into men being literally dysfunctional, and emotionally illiterate. So we never develop the emotions to carry through in life. So there are certain things, and earlier you spoke about how hard it was for men to get things out, because that has never been the mantra. And so if we want to do or change that paradigm, we must begin to work along a continuum. We must begin to work with our boys, and we must reculture, not in a man box perspective. We must now work with our adolescent who may have been concretized in a particular way, and we have to work with the older men who will now be the coach in terms of the younger ones, because they are going to tell the young one, this is how you should behave, this is how you should not behave. And therefore, if we want to really change the way we see and interact with men, we must change, we meaning all of us, because you as a parent will begin to culture your son in a particular way.
I was going to ask, I wanted to be devil's advocate actually. If I could, I wanted to be devil's advocate because my thing is, most children, boys included, are actually raised by their mothers. There are many absent fathers in the home.
Correct.
So why is it, if most children, including the boy child, is raised by his mother, why is there still this gender disparity so prevalent? Why aren't the mothers training their boy children to be a bit more emotionally intelligent?
Unfortunately, I'll tell you two reasons for that. You sure you can just close it? Because two reasons. One, society is who dictate how we grow. Don't ever get mistaken that our mother and father did dictate that. They are but a small percentage that really adds into the callaloo of growth. The real dashing bush that makes up the majority of the callaloo is society. The school that they go to. When the school tells you, boy, you will do that, that is what they will do. When their peer tell them that is what they will do. And so when it comes to whether or not you grow with a mom or a dad or whatever the case is, that child is influenced by what they see, and so much so. Now we are dealing with real-time 24-hour television, internet and stuff. So the amount of things that is coming into them that tells them, because they want to be 20 years with a big gold chain, driving a nice car, because that is who and what they see.
You know, I want to interject. We'll get kick off the set tonight.
Wait, let me rush.
No, just now, your clothing there and where you're going. How much of that do we bring into our historical context?
None
at all?
No, we do.
Because we have a situation where, if we look at some others, you see greater prevalence of emotional intelligence. You see the ability to have the hugs and so on, and nobody thinks, boy, you're gay, you know, you're homosexual. You see tears openly. You don't see that with us.
Correct.
And I'm saying that to say, we need part two, because the history behind our people has also dictated that, and part of the reason why you have the women perpetrating just what Dr. Williams talked about, pushing an agenda that's more patriarchal than what the men and they understand, is because that's what they had to do, and that comes down in the DNA, and that's what they believe in. So some of the most patriarchal people in our society is the women.
So let me tell you this, and when I talk about trauma, which is exactly what we're talking about here, trauma didn't start here. We have to go back to the slavery and the trauma of slavery. We have to talk about the trauma of ancestral nuances. We have to talk about our great-great-great-grandfather and great-grandmother and come down the road. That is where trauma is. And that is why we are who we are. That is why, correct. So you want your boys, you literally tell your boy that you ought to go there and fight. You swear you're in a war somewhere. And now you put this boy in this war mind. So you going out there rough and tough and ready to battle, and then boom, 18 years he pick up a young girl now, and they want him to be a gentleman, and they want him to be loving and kind. But that's not what you're trained meant to do, though.
The other harsh reality is survival. Time running out, and time gone. When you have to survive, I just saw something with Jay-Z, and I'm kind of a fan of Jay-Z. The mind behind the man. It's an interesting thing. One of the things he said is that he was taught everything other than emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And if you follow Jay-Z's story, I mean, we may not like capitalism and all of that, but you have to understand the greatness behind a black cocaine selling fella moving from being in the ghetto doing what he's doing to being a billionaire of something like rap and then business investments. And I suppose all they're gonna have to come back and tell us how to figure out all that TV and cable we watching that them young men like to emulate, how to take the positive aspects of it. And I mean, if I'm to be, well, I mightn't say this on TV, so let me leave that alone.
Yes.
Right? But Delisa, let's close up. Let's close up because we might end up with a 40-hour part 2.
I think we need to be each other's brothers keepers. I think support is very important, especially now.
Tell us how to show support. I'm pushing in. How to show support. Because some of us don't know.
I would say communication.
Call somebody and ask them how they do it.
Be approachful. As women, we could be very vindictive. We could be very harsh with our words as well. I think even in relationships, we should be more open to our partners or men. Because they are struggling, as you said. A lot of pressure is being placed on them, and they don't even know how to express their emotions. But I think as women, because we are emotional creatures, I think we are more pastoral. We should more or less create that safe space that they could feel comfortable after a long day to come and say, well, okay, let me unwind with my partner. How was your day? How is it going? And I just want to share this as I was, I'm reflecting on this. My parents, I always admired their relationship. My mom and, my stepdad. My stepdad had this way where, he would wait before, he used to run taxi in the evening. He used to wait until my mom, reached home and have that conversation. How was your day? Tell me about your day. And until they reset or they come and talk about it, he's not even going to leave home sometimes, depending on how the conversation goes. That is, he ain't even going out the road again,
Right.
So you have to know who you're with as an individual. You have to know your partner. You have to know their strengths. You have to know their weaknesses. And as women, we should not, you see, we shouldn't throw it in, our partner's faces, their shortcomings, because, we could be very hurtful with our words at times. That's all we have, our mouth, is our weapon, So I think we just need to be a brother's keeper, and we also need to be very supportive to one another. Show kindness. Everybody out here is battling an issue that we know nothing about.
True.
So correct. So
that is, I agree with that. Social support is extremely key. But in a culture that pushes individualism, in a culture that says don't trust anybody, a culture that says don't say anything because people will blight your blessings. Like, more and more you go on social media and you're getting messages to stay to yourself. Keep everything to yourself. You can't trust people. People are malicious. People have thousands of friends on Facebook, but when they really need somebody, they do zero. So I think we need to spend time fostering really good relationships with people.
I love this. That's a beautiful way to end. It's difficult for us because of how we are in the society, as Dr. Williams said. the vibe now is to be skeptical, you know. I mean, we come from a society where they tell you don't show a picture of your child because child will get maljo or somebody. I know all kinds of beliefs, but we are an interdependent species, right? If you don't believe me, go and watch Avatar. Is Avatar the name of the show?
The blue people?
Yes, the blue people. That's my favorite show.
Me
because
too.
it tells us about how we should really interact as human. It shows us the respect that we need to have for nature, for each other, that greater understanding that we need to have. Don't just watch the show, you know, for entertainment. Watch the show for the education behind it. Watch it over and over and over. And if you have children or you have a child like that, you can watch Inside Out as well, because that's happiness and sadness.
Emotions.
Another favorite show, Emotions. I'm giving all the television shows here based on what the experts talk about. These are things that can help us. I really want to say thank you to all of you guys. I will beg personally to have a part 2 and maybe 3 of this discussion, because we have so many things to talk about. How do we begin to be supportive women in intimate partner relationships? Because that's key for our wellness in the society right now. We don't have the tools. We could be loving mothers, but are we loving partners? Right? Anyways, it's time for me to shut up. We're having a good time. Thank you very much for viewing For the Hour. I am Glendora Lashley. Good night.
Good night.